My husband had been drugging me every night. One day, I pretended to swallow the pills, stayed awake, and followed him downstairs at 2 a.m. What I saw him doing with my own sister in our backyard shed changed everything. If you are still here, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. I want to know how far this story of betrayal and revenge will travel. Last Tuesday wasn't supposed to destroy my life, but it did. And the strangest part is that everything started months before that morning, long before I ever imagined my husband James and my younger sister Emma could even look at each other the wrong way. For 7 years, I believed I had a perfect marriage. We met at a networking event in 2018, when he walked up to me with that confident smile, offering a drink and a joke that made half the room turn to look. He was ambitious, charming, and everyone seemed to like him instantly. He listened when I spoke, remembered things I forgot I said, and made me feel chosen in a way I never had before. He proposed a year later, and our wedding was stunning. White roses, soft jazz, a glowing sunset behind us. Emma was my maid of honor, crying through her entire speech about how I was her role model, her best friend, the person she trusted most in the world. I still have the video. I watched it last week and almost threw up. Emma was always the sweet one, 2 years younger, a little chaotic but warm. She married Marcus, a quiet, thoughtful high school teacher who adored her. Together, we were an inseparable little family. Double dates, holidays, backyard barbecues. I used to tell people I was lucky to have not just a good husband, but a sister who loved him like a brother. That sentence haunts me now. 6 months ago, the first cracks appeared, just hairline fractures, things easy to dismiss. Emma started showing up more often. At first, it made sense. She said she felt lonely while Marcus was grading papers or coaching after school. She'd stop by with pastries or coffee, offering girl time, though she always perked up when James walked into the room. Then James started working from home. His office was downtown with a skyline view he bragged about for years, but suddenly the commute was too stressful. He claimed he needed quiet to finish a big project. And every time I walked past the home office, the door was closed. They both got jumpy. I would walk into a room and find them each quickly lowering their phones, glancing at me with that split-second look people make when they've been caught doing something they shouldn't. The messages got more frequent. I'd see James's phone light up with Emma's name, and he'd smile, not a normal smile, but one that curled slightly at the edges, like he'd been waiting for her. When I asked, he'd shrug. She's asking about Mom's birthday, or she's talking about a TV show. But Emma somehow knew things about James's schedule. I never told her. If I mentioned a meeting, she already knew the exact time. I brushed it off because what was the alternative? That my husband was sleeping with my sister? Absurd. They were family. Family doesn't do that. But the truth doesn't care what we believe. The first physical sign hit 2 months ago. I found one of Emma's earrings tangled in the pocket of James's dress shirt while doing laundry. A small silver hoop I'd seen her wear 100 times. My stomach dropped so hard I had to sit on the edge of the bed. When I showed James, he barely looked up from his laptop. She helped reorganize the closet last week. Remember? Must have fallen. The tone was wrong. Too smooth. Too ready. Like he had practiced it. For a moment, I wanted to push, scream, demand answers, but instead, I swallowed it. Because choosing to believe he was lying meant choosing to accept the collapse of my life. So I told myself I was overthinking. Until the night started. Every night for weeks, James handed me a sleeping pill. "You've been stressed," he'd say, almost tender. And yes, I had been stressed because somewhere deep inside me, a truth I didn't want to face was clawing to escape. The pills hit too hard, too fast. I'd sleep 8, 9, sometimes 10 hours, waking groggy and disoriented. And always, James was awake, freshly showered, energized. I asked him once, "Do I really need these?" He kissed my forehead and said, "Just until work slows down." But something was wrong. Something was very wrong. And last Tuesday morning, when everything finally snapped into place, I realized the truth. I was being put to sleep, silenced, removed as an obstacle for something much darker, something happening inside my own home, something or someone they didn't want me to see. And soon, I would, because the night before, I pretended to swallow the pill, and that single lie would reveal every truth they tried to bury. The night I pretended to swallow the pill, everything in my world shifted from suspicion to certainty. I remember standing in the bathroom afterward, staring at my reflection, gripping the edge of the sink as the water ran. My hand shook, not from fear, but from the kind of clarity that burns. I didn't take the pill. I tucked it under my tongue, then spit it into a tissue once James walked out. For weeks, I had been slipping under as soon as the pill touched my stomach. Tonight, I stayed awake. And I planned. I crawled into bed, breathing slow, letting my muscles go limp the way they usually did when the medication kicked in. James climbed in beside me, the mattress dipping. He kissed my temple, whispered, "Good night, baby," and wrapped an arm around me. It felt wrong. Every touch felt like a lie now. I kept my breathing steady, eyelids heavy but open just a sliver. He didn't move for 10 minutes. He was waiting, watching, making sure the drug had worked. My heart beat so loudly, I was terrified he could hear it. Then, at exactly 1:58 a.m., he slowly slid his arm away. He moved gently, carefully, as if afraid to wake me, not like a loving husband, but like a thief escaping a house he robbed. My eyes stayed almost closed as he stood beside the bed, watching me. I didn't flinch. After a long minute, he quietly left the room. The second I heard the soft click of the bedroom door, my entire body snapped awake. My blood surged with adrenaline, buzzing under my skin. I slipped out of bed, barefoot, moving slowly across the floor so the old boards wouldn't creak. The house was silent, too silent. I crept toward the stairs, leaning just enough to see him below. James wasn't heading to the kitchen or the office. He walked past both straight to the back door. He grabbed a flashlight, slipped on his shoes, and stepped outside. My breath caught. He was going to the shed, their place. The realization hit like a punch. He had been meeting Emma in there while I was drugged upstairs. It made me want to scream, to break something, but I held still. I waited 10 full seconds, then followed. The November air slapped my face cold, sharp. I hugged myself, shivering as I watched James from a distance. He wasn't just walking. He was checking over his shoulder, scanning the yard, making sure the neighbors' lights were off. He moved like a man with something to hide. And then, he unlocked the shed door with her key, the one I gave Emma years ago for emergencies. A sour taste hit my mouth. He slipped inside. The door clicked behind him. Lights flicked on inside, warm, yellow, soft. Too soft for a storage space. More like a hideaway. I edged closer. My entire body trembled, not from cold but from fury threatening to rip through my skin. When I reached the window, I had to grip the frame to steady myself. Inside, James wasn't alone. Emma was already there. My sister, my blood standing barefoot on the rug, wearing one of James's sweatshirts like it belonged to her. She smiled at him in a way she never smiled at Marcus. A slow, intimate smile. My stomach rolled so violently I pressed my hand to my mouth. James cupped her face, brushed her hair back, whispered something I couldn't hear. Then he kissed her, deeply, like they had been starving and finally found food. My vision tunneled. The world shrank to that single window. My sister, my husband, the two people I trusted most in the same room, touching, laughing softly, like their betrayal was the most natural thing in the world. I don't remember breathing. I don't remember thinking. I only remember rage, white-hot, pure, cold at the same time. They moved together so easily, so familiarly. She touched him like she owned him. He touched her like he'd been waiting all day. I stepped back before they could hear the crunch of leaves under my foot. I wanted to tear the shed down. I wanted to break the window. But instead, I slipped back inside and leaned against the wall, shaking so badly my teeth clicked. It wasn't just cheating. This wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't emotional confusion. This was planned, organized, practiced. And the pills, oh God, the pills. He wasn't knocking me out for my health. He was knocking me out so I wouldn't find out what he was doing with her. I sank to the floor, biting my fist to keep from screaming. How long had this been happening? How many nights had they laughed together while I lay unconscious upstairs? There was no more room for denial, and in that moment, something dark, something sharp settled inside me. I wasn't going to confront them, not yet. I wasn't going to beg for explanations or cry or fall apart. I was going to plan. I was going to make them feel the weight of every lie they told, every kiss they shared, every pill they fed me. They thought I was asleep. They thought I was oblivious. They thought they were untouchable. But they were wrong. I crawled back into bed before James returned at 3:11 a.m., smelling like sweat and betrayal. He looked at me for a long time, like checking I was still under. I didn't blink. I didn't move, and when he finally slid beneath the covers, turning his back to me, I opened my eyes wide awake, furious, and done being his victim. Tomorrow, I would follow my instincts, and soon, I would catch them in daylight. The morning after pretending to take the pill, I woke up before James for the first time in weeks. Not naturally, my body felt like it had been dragged through gravel, but awake, present, aware. And the first thing I saw was James watching me from the doorway, holding a mug of coffee he didn't offer me. He looked relieved, like he needed to confirm I was still under his control. "Rough night?" he asked casually, but his eyes were scanning me, checking for signs I'd been conscious. I forced a yawn, stretched, pretended to blink blearily. "Yeah," I murmured. "The pills knocked me out again." His shoulders loosened. He believed me, and that was the moment I realized how deeply he relied on my ignorance. Every lie he told depended on me staying quiet, staying obedient, staying asleep. While he got ready for work, or whatever he now called, disappearing for hours, I watched him closely, truly watching him in a way I never had before. Every movement, every reaction, every flicker of guilt he fought to hide. And once you start noticing, you can't stop noticing. The signs were everywhere, woven into the last several months like a thread I'd refused to pull. Emma's visits, the late-night messages, the sudden shifts in James's behavior, all of it had been sitting in plain sight, waiting for me to stop trusting the wrong people. I replayed every moment of the past year with new lenses, and the picture that formed made my skin crawl. The day after Thanksgiving, when Emma had disappeared for nearly 20 minutes to call a friend, and James followed soon after to check the turkey, even though we weren't hosting. Both came back looking flushed, relaxed. I'd noticed then, but I buried it because the alternative was unbearable. Or Emma knowing James's meeting schedule down to the minute, something even I forgot half the time. I used to laugh and say they were so similar, and Emma would blush, waving it off. Now that memory felt rotten, sour in my chest. The more I looked back, the more everything realigned into a truth I had missed, because I trusted them, trusted family, trusted marriage, trusted a system built on promises they broke behind my back. For the rest of the morning, I moved through my routine, silently cataloging every interaction, every detail. How James reacted when I touched him too stiff, how he relaxed when he looked at his phone too warm, how he avoided kissing me deeply too guilty. By noon, I knew I couldn't confront them, not with emotion, not with guesswork. I needed certainty, evidence, something undeniable, irrefutable, something they couldn't manipulate or twist back at me. Because one thing was clear, they had gotten good at lying, very good. Months of practice had sharpened their deceit until it was nearly seamless. So I watched them, closely. I watched how Emma's visits became almost choreographed. She always arrived when James was home. She always had an excuse that sounded like she'd rehearsed it in the car. She always stayed just long enough for suspicion to flicker, and then she'd leave before anything appeared obvious. But subtle doesn't mean invisible. I learned to pay attention to the gaps. Like the way they never entered or exited a room together, they thought that would look suspicious, but they always disappeared within minutes of each other. A pattern so clean, it became dirty. The next test came at a family gathering the following weekend. I arrived with a purpose this time, not to socialize, but to observe, to watch them move within the same space. And it didn't take long. Emma excused herself to take a call. 5 minutes later, James went to check on the grill, even though he wasn't the one cooking. They came back separately. Emma's lipstick smudged at the corner, James running a hand through his hair like he'd been sweating. I watched the entire exchange from across the room, my expression perfectly neutral, while inside me something twisted tighter than a knot. And Marcus, God, poor Marcus. He moved around the gathering with this open, gentle sincerity, smiling at Emma like she hung the moon. When she brushed past him dismissively, he didn't even notice. When she avoided standing next to him for pictures, he assumed she was distracted. Meanwhile, she couldn't stop glancing at James even when she shouldn't, even when she thought no one was looking. But I was looking. I had become an expert in looking, in seeing everything they thought they had hidden. At night, I lie in bed, pretending to sleep, as James pressed another pill into my hand, watching me too carefully as I swallowed. Then he'd slip away at exactly 2 a.m. Always 2 a.m., like his guilt followed a schedule. And every time, I felt myself fracturing a little more, breaking and hardening simultaneously. Because the truth wasn't just that they were cheating. The truth was that they were brazen enough to cheat inside my home, confident I wouldn't wake up, confident the pills would keep me silenced. And they were right until now. By the third night of pretending, James had grown careless, comfortable. He returned from the shed smelling faintly of Emma's perfume, vanilla musk, something he once hated on me but apparently loved on her. It clung to his hoodie, to his hair, to his skin. I had to force myself not to recoil when he slid into bed beside me, placing a hand on my hip like nothing about our lives was wrong, like he didn't have another woman's lipstick on the collar of his shirt. The anger simmering inside me turned into something sharper: strategy, calculation. If I wanted to expose them, I needed to catch them in daylight, catch them when they thought I was gone, catch them with no escape. The idea formed slowly at first, then quickly, then all at once. A plan so clean, so perfect, so inevitable, that I couldn't believe I hadn't seen it sooner. If James was using my unconsciousness to hide his affair, then I needed to create a situation where he believed I was gone entirely, not asleep, gone, out of town, out of reach. And the opportunity came faster than I expected. A scheduled work trip to Portland, a trip James knew about, a trip Emma knew about, a trip they no doubt intended to use for another one of their secret rendezvous. Only this time, the trip wasn't happening. I knew it. My boss knew it. But James did not. And I wasn't going to tell him, because the only thing more dangerous than a cheating spouse is a cheating spouse who thinks he's safe. This wasn't paranoia anymore. It wasn't suspicion. It was truth sharpening itself into a weapon. And soon, I would use it. Because the moment they believed I was out of town would be the moment they exposed themselves completely. And I would be waiting awake, aware, and no longer the woman they could drug into silence. 3 weeks ago, right before everything snapped open like a wound, I got the email confirming my Portland trip had been postponed. A client emergency on their end, rescheduling the whole presentation to the following week. A normal person would have told their spouse immediately, but I didn't. Something in me, something instinctual and ancient, told me to keep it to myself. Not out of spite, but strategy. That email felt like a key dropping into my hand. A chance to see James and Emma without the mask they put on whenever I was in the room. If they thought I would be gone for 2 days, they would relax, they would be careless, they would show their true faces. On the night before the trip, I packed my bags exactly the way I always did. I laid out a blazer on the chair, zipped my laptop case, even printed the itinerary so nothing seemed off. James hovered around me with unusual affection, too much affection. He touched my shoulders, my waist, my hair, lingering in ways he hadn't in months. At first I thought it was guilt, but the more he touched me, the more it felt like relief. Relief that I'd be gone. Relief that he could stop pretending for 48 hours. Relief that he could slip into the shed with Emma without worrying about the floorboards creaking above him. The irony made me nauseous. At one point, as I folded a blouse, he came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my stomach. "I'm going to miss you," he murmured into my neck, kissing the skin softly. It should have comforted me. Instead, it felt like someone pressing a bruise. "It's just one night," I whispered back. "I'll be home tomorrow evening." He tightened his hold, sighing dramatically. "Still, the house will feel empty without you." That sentence stayed with me long after I pulled away. Empty. He said it like he was already imagining what he would do with all that space, with all that freedom. The next morning, I woke early, showered, dressed in work clothes, and wheeled my suitcase down the stairs just as he was sipping coffee in the kitchen. He acted sleepy, wearing the same worn t-shirt he always wore on work-from-home days. It struck me then how much I had allowed him to claim that phrase, work from home, when really he'd been working from her, working on hiding a life I was never meant to see. "Drive safely," he said, kissing my cheek like a dutiful husband. "Call me when you get there." I nodded, grabbed my keys, forced a smile. "Love you," I said automatically, because betrayal doesn't erase habits overnight. "Love you too," he replied, and I felt nothing. The moment I drove off, my heart hammered so hard I thought it might bruise my ribs. I took the highway ramp like I was heading to Portland, keeping my speed steady in case James somehow watched me disappear into traffic. But as soon as I reached the first exit 5 miles out, I looped around. My hands shook on the steering wheel. This was it. No turning back. I parked 3 blocks from the house, on a quiet side street no one used. I couldn't risk him seeing my car. The air was cold, wet from the overnight drizzle, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones. I walked the rest of the way, my steps sounding too loud on the pavement even though no one was around. Every breath came out white. My body felt electrified, caught between terror and certainty. What if I was wrong? What if I ruined my marriage over a feeling, a suspicion? A set of coincidences that looked damning only because I wanted them to look that way? But deep down, I didn't believe that. Not anymore. I wasn't walking toward a maybe. I was walking toward a truth I already knew. And I prayed, silently, desperately, that the truth wouldn't be as bad as I feared. Because if it was, I didn't know who I would become by the end of the day. When I reached my street, I stopped behind the tall cedar hedge by our driveway, hidden from view. My hands were ice cold inside my sleeves. The house looked exactly the way it always did at 8:45 inches the morning, quiet, peaceful, sun touching the roof just right. The yard I tended every spring looked soft and harmless. The blue front door looked welcoming. The entire scene looked like a picture of domestic safety. I hated it for lying to me. I waited. 10 minutes, 15. My heartbeat never settled. I didn't know exactly what I was waiting for until it appeared, a familiar red Honda CR-V turning onto my street. Emma's car, the one Marcus bought her last year for her birthday. The car she once cried over because she said it made her feel so loved. The irony nearly made me choke. She parked in my driveway like it was her own home. She stepped out quickly, glancing around, not nervously, but looking for James. Then she walked straight to my door. She didn't knock. She didn't hesitate. She used her own key, the same key I gave her for emergencies. My fingers curled into fists, so tight the nails bit into my palms. Inside, she thought I was gone. She thought James was alone. She thought she had the entire day with him, safe from discovery. And I wanted to storm inside and catch them right there in the entryway. But something stopped me, instinct or discipline, or just the cold knowledge that if I waited, I would see more, know more, understand more. 20 minutes later, they emerged together from the back of the house and walked toward the shed. And when I saw James carrying the blanket from our bed, something inside me ruptured. Emma laughed at something, he said. He touched her arm. She leaned into him. They moved like lovers, not cautious, not restrained, comfortable, rehearsed. When they slipped inside the shed and shut the door, I felt the world crystallize around me, not breaking, not melting, but hardening into something sharp. Everything I feared, everything I suspected, everything I tried to bury, I was about to confront head-on, not emotionally, not verbally, strategically, because this wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was opportunity. This was timing. This was the moment I had been unknowingly preparing myself for. And they had no idea that the woman they thought they had drugged into silence was standing just outside, ice-cold, wide awake, and ready to bury them under their own lies. I don't remember deciding to move closer to the shed. My feet carried me the way a body drifts during a nightmare, slow, deliberate, weightless. The November air stung my cheeks, filling my lungs with something sharp enough to keep me focused. I stayed low, edging along the fence line, careful not to disturb the gravel or snap a branch. The shed stood about 20 yards from the house, tucked behind the maple tree James once insisted on planting for shade. I used to think it was romantic. Now I realized he'd been creating the perfect cover. A private space hidden from neighbors, a place with insulation, electricity, a heater more comfortable than most people's home offices. I reached the corner of the fence and stopped, peering through a small gap between 2 warped boards. Our shed door, was closed. Light glowed faintly through the narrow window, and inside, muffled laughter. Their laughter. I wanted to vomit. I wanted to run inside, screaming. I wanted to shove the door open and tear the entire world apart with my bare hands. But instead, I froze. Because the moment I heard Emma's voice, soft, breathy, intimate, the last piece of denial inside me died. This wasn't an impulse. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was routine, practiced, comfortable, a system they'd built inside the ruins of my trust. The cold settled deeper into my bones until I felt almost numb, not weak, just stripped of whatever softness had kept me forgiving for so long. A strange clarity took over, flattening everything into simple choices. Option 1. Confront them now. Burst in, scream, demand answers they'd twist into excuses. They'd deny. They'd manipulate. They'd gaslight me until I questioned whether I had imagined everything. Option 2. Do what they never expected. Be smarter. Be patient. Be cold. Let them incriminate themselves in real time, with no room to breathe, no room to run, no room to hide behind rehearsed lies. And I chose option 2, because at that point, I didn't just want the truth. I wanted the consequences. I stepped back from the fence, moving silently toward the shed's side wall. From there, I could hear everything more clearly. The low rumble of James's voice, Emma's breathy giggle, the quiet thump of bodies shifting. Every sound punctured me, but the pain didn't control me anymore. It fueled me. I looked down and noticed something leaning against the outer workbench, an old master padlock we used when traveling to secure the shed. Heavy, cold, solid. It almost looked like it was waiting for me. I picked it up, feeling its weight settle into my palm. My pulse steadied, my breathing evened. This was the first moment in months I felt in control of anything. I slipped to the front of the shed, where the metal latch rested just below the handle. The same latch James had installed, insisting it was for raccoons. Now it was for something much bigger. I listened again, couldn't stop myself. Emma whispered, "Are you sure she won't come back early?" James laughed softly. "She's halfway to Portland by now. We have hours." The certainty in his voice was the final cut to the last thread of restraint in me. Slowly, quietly, with hands that no longer shook, I slid the padlock through the latch. The metal fit perfectly, almost too perfectly, like it understood the assignment. I pressed the shackle down, and when the lock snapped shut with a crisp, echoing click, the sound shot through me like electricity. It was the cleanest, most satisfying noise I'd ever heard. Inside the shed, everything went silent, completely silent. I didn't move, didn't step back, didn't breathe. I just stood there, staring at the freshly locked door, the barrier between them and the life they'd annihilated, waiting for the realization to hit them. It came fast. "James, did you hear that?" Emma's voice, muffled through the wall, trembled. James answered, annoyed. "Probably the heater." "No," she whispered. It sounded like she never finished. The doorknob rattled. Once, twice. Harder. A pause. Then James's voice shifted, laced with suspicion. "Why won't it open?" Panic crept in. "It's stuck," Emma said, her tone rising. "James, it's stuck." "It's not stuck. Someone locked it." His words sent a dark thrill through my bloodstream. They finally understood they weren't alone. "Rebecca?" James shouted, pounding the inside of the door. "If you're out there, this isn't funny. Open the door." I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because this moment wasn't about them anymore. It was about me reclaiming everything they stole. Silence stretched between each thud against the wood. Emma's frantic, high-pitched breathing seeped through the cracks. James's fists hit harder now, angrier. But fear was underneath. Real fear. Good. Let him feel something. "Rebecca," he yelled again. "Open the damn door." But I was already stepping back, turning away from the shed with a calmness that stunned even me. Their voices followed me across the yard, muffled shouts, frantic rattling. The sound of two people finally realizing their secret world had collapsed. I walked slowly, deliberately, the cold air filling my lungs like a new beginning. Because locking them inside wasn't the end of my plan. It was only the beginning. Soon, they'd face someone far more honest than either of them. Someone who deserved to see the truth with his own eyes. Marcus. And I had 20 minutes before he arrived. The moment I walked away from the shed, my heartbeat finally began to slow, not because I was calm, but because something colder had taken over. A version of myself I didn't know I was capable of becoming. A version forged from betrayal and clarity, and a kind of steady rage that felt almost clean. I stood in the middle of the yard, listening to them pound on the inside of the door, and for the first time in months, I felt something close to control settle into my bones. But locking them in wasn't enough. Not yet. If they sat inside with the heater on, lights glowing, wrapped in the chen from my bed, they could convince themselves this was temporary. A setback, a misunderstanding, something they could manipulate their way out of. No, if they were going to face what they did, truly face it, then their comfort had to go, their safety had to go, their illusion of privacy had to go. So I walked along the side of the house to the breaker box. James labeled himself the day we moved in. He'd been so proud of his neat handwriting, shed, outlets, and heater. I stared at the switch for a moment, inhaling, tasting the metallic cold of the morning on my tongue. Then I flipped it. Click. Inside the shed, the heater died instantly. A faint thunk sounded as something mechanical wound down. Then, Emma's panicked voice pierced through the silence. "James!" The heat stopped. "The lights, James! The lights!" And his reply sharp, furious, scared. "God damn it! Something's wrong! Rebecca! Rebecca! Open the door!" I leaned against the siding of the house, listening to their fear build like a growing storm. Good. Let them sit in it. Let it seep into their skin. Let them realize they no longer controlled the narrative. They controlled nothing. I checked my phone. 9:28 a.m. If I wanted Marcus to be here in about 20 minutes, the perfect timing I needed to call him now. My fingers hovered over his name for a moment. Marcus, who trusted Emma with a purity that made my chest ache. Marcus, who never deserved any of this. Marcus, who would walk into hell this morning without warning. I exhaled and pressed call. His voice came through bright, warm, completely oblivious to the war zone he was about to enter. "Rebecca! Hey, everything okay?" I studied the ground as I answered, keeping my tone perfectly controlled. "Not really. There's a situation." "What happened?" Concern sharpened instantly in his voice. The shed door jammed. James went in to fix something, and it somehow locked behind him. "I'm not home, and I don't know when I'll be back. Could you swing by and help him?" There was a small pause, the kind where someone starts putting pieces together, but not enough to form a picture. "Of course. Actually, I'm off today, professional development. I can be there in 20 minutes. Emma left early, said she was running errands or helping you with something?" I almost laughed. A bitter, humorless sound pressed against my throat, but I swallowed it. "Right," I said softly. "She's very helpful." "Should I bring tools?" he asked. "No, I think he has everything inside. Probably just needs someone to open the door from outside." "Got it. I'll head over now. Key still under the garden gnome?" "Yes." My voice wavered just enough for him to notice. "Rebecca, are you sure you're okay?" I forced breath into my lungs. "I will be." I hung up before he could ask anything else. The moment the call ended, the shedding of emotion hit me, a wave of trembling adrenaline washing through my arms, my legs. For a second, I let myself sit on the back step, gripping the edge of the wooden stair as my body tried to reconcile everything happening at once. From the shed, they were still yelling, still rattling the door, still trying to force their way out. "Rebecca, open this damn door!" James's voice was hoarse now, edged with something he usually hid from everyone: fear. "Please, please, Rebecca, talk to us." Emma's voice cracked, high and desperate. "We can explain everything. Explain." As if there was an explanation for 8 months of betrayal that didn't involve them choosing each other again and again and again. I stood and walked back toward the shed, not close enough for them to see me, but close enough that I could savor the panic in their voices. James slammed his palm against the wood, sending small vibrations through the ground. "Rebecca, this is illegal. Do you hear me? You can't just lock people inside a—" I almost smiled. Illegal. Interesting word choice for a man sleeping with his wife's sister. "Rebecca, please," Emma cried again. "We're scared." Good, I thought. So was I. Every night you drugged me by proxy. Every night you met in the dark behind my back. Every month you built a secret little world excluding me. Now they could sit with fear for once, and I was done speaking their language. I checked the street through the fence, just in time to see Marcus's truck turn onto the block. My pulse quickened, not with panic but with something steadier. Purpose, justice, the truth arriving with a rumble of tires. This was the moment the universe aligned. The moment they'd be forced to face what they'd done, not privately, not with lies ready, but exposed, raw, cornered. Marcus parked behind the house, jumped out, and jogged toward me with concern etched across his face. "Where is he?" he asked. "In the shed," I said simply. "Door stuck?" He nodded, still not understanding, still too innocent, still believing the best of people who didn't deserve it. "Okay, let's get him out." I stepped back, handing him the key to the padlock. He didn't notice how steady my hand was, or how intensely I watched him approach the door, or how silent the yard had become. Inside the shed, they must have heard his footsteps, because suddenly, Everything went still. No banging, no screaming, no pleading. Just breathless, terrified quiet. "James?" Marcus called. "You in there?" And from behind the door, from the cramped wooden cube where I had trapped their affair, came Emma's trembling whisper. "Marcus?" I didn't look away from his face as it shattered. Not this time, not for them, not ever again. Marcus froze the second he heard Emma's voice through the shed door. It wasn't loud, it wasn't clear, it wasn't even a full word, just his name, trembling, muffled, unmistakably hers. But it was enough. His entire face changed, the way a person changes when the ground under them suddenly becomes water. Confusion first, then disbelief. Then a fear so raw it made him sway on his feet as if someone had shoved him. "Emma?" he whispered, stepping closer. The key in his hand rattled. "Why? Why is Emma in there?" His voice was thin, splintering at the edges. I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because truth has a weight of its own. It fills the air, thickens it, presses itself into your skin, even before words catch up. Marcus looked at me then. Really looked. And something in my silence confirmed everything he was afraid to imagine. His throat worked around a swallow. "Rebecca?" he said quietly. "What's going on?" I held out my hand toward the door. "Open it," I said. He hesitated, just long enough for the moment to fracture, then stepped forward on legs that didn't seem to know how to hold him anymore. His fingers fumbled with the key, shaking so violently he nearly dropped it. Inside the shed, I heard Emma sob. A choked, strangled sound that made Marcus flinch like he'd been hit. "Marcus, please," she cried. "Please don't open it." That was the wrong thing to say, because Marcus said nothing, did nothing except freeze for one more second, and then the key clicked into the lock, a sharp metallic sound that carved itself into the cold morning. I held my breath without meaning to. He turned the key, pulled the padlock free, stared at it in his hand, confused, betrayed, horrified all at once. Then he gripped the handle, inhaled shakily, and yanked the door open. For a moment, everything was still. No movement, no breath, no time. Just a rectangle of sunlight spilling into the shed, illuminating the truth we all knew was coming, but none of us were prepared to see. And then the scene came into focus. Emma, sitting on the blanket from my bed, knees pulled up, mascara streaking her face in black rivers. Her hair knotted, sweatshirt slipping off one shoulder. James beside her, shirt twisted, fly partially undone, eyes blown wide with the realization that his universe had just collided with the real one. Marcus's face didn't react at first. It didn't even move. It simply stopped, like every emotion froze midair before it could reach him. He stared at Emma as though he were looking at a stranger who had stolen his wife's face. His voice, when it finally scraped out of his throat, barely sounded human. "Emma," he whispered, a single thread unraveling. What? What is this?" Emma scrambled to her knees, reaching for him, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. "Marcus, please let me explain, please. It's not what it looks like. Not what it looks like?" His voice cracked, broke apart, rebuilt itself into something hollow. "You're half-dressed, on a blanket, in a locked shed with her husband. Tell me what it's supposed to look like." Emma covered her mouth, crying harder. James stood abruptly. "Marcus, listen, we made a mistake." Marcus backed away like the air around him had turned poisonous. "Don't," he choked. "Don't talk to me." Then he looked at me, and the devastation in his eyes nearly pulled the breath from my chest. "You locked them in?" he asked. I nodded. His chest rose sharply. "Good." That one word, shattered, quiet, honest, felt like a verdict. James stepped forward, anger beginning to harden over the panic on his face. "Rebecca, this is insane. You can't what?" I interrupted, my voice calm in a way that scared even me. "Catch you in the act? Force you to stop lying? Make you look at what you did? We need to talk privately," James snapped, as if he still believed he had authority over me, over the situation, over reality. "There's nothing private about what you did," I said. "Nothing." Marcus shook his head again and again, like he was trying to dislodge the scene, erase it, wake up from it. "How long?" he whispered. "Tell me how long," Emma cried harder, voice collapsing. 8 months, she sobbed. The word detonated in the air. Marcus let out a sound, half-gasp, half-wounded animal that made my skin break into chills. 8 months, he repeated, barely audible. 8 months, you lied to me. It just happened. Emma begged, crawling toward him. It wasn't planned, we didn't mean to. Stop. His voice sliced through her words. I don't want your excuses. I want you to stay away from me. She froze. Completely froze, like her body had been unplugged from itself. And James, dense, delusional James, ran a hand through his hair, trying to salvage something, anything. Rebecca, you can't throw away our marriage over a mistake. A mistake? My laugh came out sharp, cutting. You drugged me into sleeping through your affair. You used my bed blanket in the shed behind my house. You brought my sister into the home I built with you. Call it what it is. His face twisted, defensive. You don't understand. No, I said, stepping toward him, my voice steady, cold steel. You don't understand. This isn't your narrative anymore. Marcus stood there, shaking, breathing like he was trying to inhale broken glass. He looked at me, really looked, and in that broken expression, I saw a man who had loved deeply and been destroyed suddenly. The same way I had been, the same way I still was. Thank you, he whispered, and then he walked away from all of them. Emma screamed his name, reaching out, but he didn't turn around. He didn't even slow down, because the truth was out now. Irreversible, and none of us, not me, not Marcus, not even James and Emma would ever be the same again. Marcus walked away from the shed like a man who'd been emptied out from the inside. His footsteps were uneven, as if his body couldn't keep up with the weight of what he had just seen. Emma was still calling after him, broken, frantic, pathetic, but he didn't turn around. And when the gate slammed shut behind him, a strange silence fell over the yard. Not peaceful, not calm, a silence like the end of a storm, where everything is too still, too sharp, too changed. James stood in the shed doorway, chest rising and falling, jaw tight with a mix of fear and rage. Emma sank onto the threshold, sobbing into her hands. And there I was, standing a few feet away, watching them unravel, not with triumph, not with joy, but with a cold clarity that felt almost surgical. This wasn't revenge fueled by chaos. It was justice delivered with precision. Rebecca, James finally said, wiping sweat from his forehead like he'd just run a marathon. We need to talk. Now, alone. The entitlement in his voice was almost laughable. You don't get to make demands, I replied, my tone flat, even. Not anymore. This is insane, he snapped, stepping forward. You locked us in. You embarrassed us in front of Marcus. You've completely overreacted. Overreacted? That word sliced through me. You've been sleeping with my sister for 8 months. 8 months. You drugged me with those pills you pretended were for stress. You used our bed blanket as a prop in your shed affair. And you think I'm overreacting? His mouth opened, but nothing came out. He tried again. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? I asked. A charity project? A spiritual awakening? A team-building exercise? Emma let out a strangled sob. Rebecca, please, I made a mistake. I didn't mean to. Stop. My voice cracked like ice. You meant every text, every secret meeting. Every time you walked into my house and smiled at me like nothing was wrong. You meant all of it. She covered her face again, shaking. For a moment, I almost felt a trace of grief, not for her, but for what she used to be to me. My sister, my confidant, the person I trusted enough to give a house key to, but that version of her was dead. She had killed it herself. James tried a different tactic, cold calculation, the tone he used during negotiations at work. Look, this is bad, but we can fix it. We can talk to a counselor. We can rebuild. You and me, we have 7 years together. That means something. I stared at him, stunned by how deeply he believed his own delusions. James, I don't want to fix anything with you. I want you out of my house. He recoiled like I'd slapped him. This is my home too. Not anymore. You can't just decide. I can. I cut in. And I already have. He stepped forward aggressively, but stopped when he saw something in my eyes, something new, something he hadn't seen before. A version of me he had created without realizing it. The version of me who no longer needed him. You're being emotional, he said, voice shaking now. You're making rash decisions. No, I said. I'm making clear ones. You have 30 minutes to pack your things. Emma let out a soft cry behind him, curling inward like she wished the earth would swallow her. She reached toward James's leg, like clinging to him would stabilize everything falling apart. He didn't even look at her. Of course he didn't. Cowards don't comfort the people they betray with. They just scramble to save themselves. Rebecca, he said again, softer now, desperate. "We can work through this. I'm done working," I said. "I'm done sacrificing. I'm done pretending your love is enough. And I'm done being asleep while you live another life behind my back." That last sentence hit him like a bullet. His eyes widened. He finally understood. "You didn't take the pills," he whispered. "I didn't confirm. I didn't have to." The realization spread through him like poison. The puzzle pieces he thought I'd never see finally aligned in his mind. The nights he slipped out, the mornings I woke groggy, the times he tested my consciousness before leaving, the way he thought he had full control. And now he knew every secret he tried to hide in the dark had been witnessed by someone wide awake. "You saw us," he said, voice hollow. "You saw everything." "Yes," I said. "I did." Emma cried harder, collapsing fully onto the wooden step. "Rebecca, I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know how to tell you. You didn't want to stop," I replied. "And you definitely didn't want to tell me. Betrayal isn't passive, Emma. You chose him every single time." She covered her ears like the truth physically hurt her. "Good, it should." James stood stiffly, breathing heavily, eyes burning with a mix of shame and resentment. "You blindsided us," he muttered. "You set us up." "No," I said quietly. "You set yourselves up. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences." And then I turned away from them both, walking back toward the house. A strange heaviness followed me, but not regret, not doubt. Something else, something closer to release. Because for the first time in months, I wasn't the one being deceived. I wasn't the one stumbling through darkness. I wasn't the one swallowing pills to stay small and unconscious. I was awake, fully, painfully awake. And they were trapped by truth, by exposure, by the wreckage they created. Behind me, their voices tangled into a pathetic duet of apologies, excuses, and anger. But none of it mattered, not anymore. I didn't need their explanations. I had reality. And soon, I would have my freedom. I didn't look back as I walked toward the house, but I heard everything. The frantic rustling of clothing, the scraping of feet on gravel, the strained whispers between two people who suddenly realized the world they built on lies was collapsing in real time. James's voice cracked somewhere behind me, low and trembling, trying to regain control he no longer had. Emma kept sobbing, the kind of helpless, guttural sound that only comes when someone finally understands they've destroyed their own life. But none of it slowed my steps. The cold November air sliced across my face, sharp but invigorating, almost cleansing. It felt like oxygen after months of sedation and confusion. I opened the back door, stepped inside, and closed it behind me with a soft click that felt more final than any slammed door. Inside, the house was quiet. The kind of quiet that follows chaos, when everything still vibrates with leftover energy. I leaned against the counter for a second, letting myself feel the weight of what had just happened, but only for a moment. I still had work to do. James wasn't gone yet. And Emma, well, Emma was standing outside waiting for someone to forgive her. That someone wasn't me. Through the kitchen window, I saw Marcus's truck turning onto the street, driving away fast, like he was escaping a crime scene. Maybe he was. Maybe betrayal is a crime scene, just without police reports. There was a hollow ache in my chest for him, deeper than the one I felt for myself. Because while I lost a husband who didn't deserve me, Marcus lost the person he believed was his partner, his teammate, his future. And he lost her in the worst possible way. Discovering her wrapped around someone else, his wife tangled with my husband like they belonged together. No one deserves that kind of cruelty, especially not him. I filled a glass of water, hands steady, and took a slow sip. I didn't feel victorious. I felt awake, aware, powerful in a way I had forgotten I could be. The kind of power that comes when you stop begging for honesty and start demanding consequences. Outside, James's voice suddenly rose, desperate now, sharp edges slicing through the air. "Rebecca, you can't be serious. You can't just end a marriage over this." I actually laughed, quietly, bitterly, the kind of laugh that comes from a place far beyond humor. I stepped outside again, calm and deliberate. They both froze the moment they saw me. James with his shirt improperly buttoned, Emma with mascara streaks down her face, both of them disheveled and shaking like two children caught stealing. "Over this?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "James, You've been cheating on me with my sister for 8 months. You drugged me to make it easier. You snuck around my home, our home, like a parasite. And you think this is something we can work through?" He swallowed hard, eyes darting between me and the ground. "Rebecca, you're upset. People do rash things when they're upset." "Stop," I said. "You don't get to control the narrative anymore." Emma stepped forward then, trembling, wiping her cheeks. "Rebecca, I swear I didn't mean for this to happen. I wasn't trying to take him from you. It was just, I felt lost, and James understood me. And you decided to destroy 2 marriages to feel better?" I cut in. She flinched, as if I'd physically struck her. "Emma, at least have the courage to call what you did by its real name. You weren't lost. You were greedy." Her chin quivered. "I still love you. You're my sister." "No," I said, voice low. "Sisters don't do what you did. You don't get that title anymore." James stepped closer, lowering his voice like he thought intimacy could win me back. "Rebecca, please. You and we built a life. You can't just throw it away." "You already threw it away," I replied. "I'm just taking out the trash." His face twisted, anger overpowering his panic for a moment. "You're going to regret this." "No, James," I said. "You regret this. You regret getting caught." He opened his mouth again, but I lifted my hand. "I'm done. You have 25 minutes left to get your things. After that, I'm calling the police to remove you from the property." His voice broke on my name, but I turned my back on him. Let his desperation echo behind me. Let him savor the taste of consequences. Let him learn that betrayal doesn't come with safety nets. Halfway across the yard, I heard Emma whisper, terrified, "James, what do we do now?" And James, voice hollow and defeated, answered, "I don't know." I didn't turn around. Not even when Emma started crying again. Not even when James punched the shed wall in frustration. Not even when both of them realized finally, painfully, that there was no going back. This wasn't the beginning of a conversation. It was the end. The end of my marriage. The end of my sisterhood. The end of the illusion that I was loved by people capable of loyalty. And the start of something else, something sharper, stronger, and truer. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one being lied to. I wasn't the one being kept in the dark. I wasn't the one swallowing pills and pretending everything was fine. They were the ones trapped now inside the consequences of their own choices. The sun moved behind a cloud. The air turned colder, and I walked back into the house, closing the door on them, on the shed, on the past version of myself who would have forgiven them. She was gone. Good riddance. Inside the house, the silence felt heavier than before, like the walls themselves were absorbing every ripple of chaos happening outside. I could still hear faint shouting from the yard, James trying to coax Emma into silence, Emma trying to breathe through hysterical sobs, but their noise no longer reached me in the same way. It wasn't my problem anymore. Their mess belonged to them now. I sat at the dining table, opened my laptop, and pulled up the email draft to my lawyer. My fingers didn't tremble. Not this time. It felt almost surgical, precise, controlled as I typed out every detail. The drugging, the affair, the shed, the evidence. I attached the photos from earlier weeks, the screenshots I'd taken when I first noticed something off, even the time-stamped call log from the night I pretended to take the pills. I had receipts, I had dates, I had truth. By the time I hit send, something inside me clicked into place, like a hinge finally settling after years of grinding. I stood and walked to the back door again, stepping outside as James came barreling toward me from the shed, face red, hair wild, eyes burning with the frantic desperation of a man who has just lost every bit of control he ever thought he had. "Rebecca," he started, voice trembling with forced authority. "We need to talk about the financials, the house, the accounts. You don't get to make these decisions alone." I didn't even blink. "I already have," I said. "My lawyer will contact yours. You have 19 minutes left." His jaw clenched, but beneath the anger was fear, real fear. Fear of losing the home he never valued. Fear of facing the world as a man exposed. Fear of confronting the things he did when he thought I'd always stay asleep. "This is irrational," he snapped. "Divorce attorneys? Threats? We can salvage this." "Stop talking like this is a misunderstanding," I interrupted. "You made a choice, and now you're facing the consequences." His mouth opened again, but footsteps behind him broke his focus. Emma approached, wiping her face with shaking hands, mascara smeared in black streaks. She looked like a ghost of herself. Small, fragile, pathetic. "Becca, please," she whispered, voice cracking. "I know this looks bad." I laughed. "Short, sharp, not humorous. Looks bad? Emma, I caught you half naked with my husband in a shed. Bad is an understatement." She flinched hard. "I didn't mean to hurt you, I swear. Intent doesn't erase betrayal," I said. "It just makes you a coward on top of a liar." She looked crushed, but I didn't care. Caring was a luxury she burned out of me. James stepped between us like some kind of mediator, even now trying to control the scene, always positioning himself in the center, as though he had the right to stand between the wreckage he caused. "Rebecca, listen," he began, softer now, trying a new tactic. "Emma and I, we were confused. We crossed lines we shouldn't have, but this doesn't mean we didn't love you." "Stop saying we like you're a unified front," I replied. "You don't get to speak for her. And you definitely don't get to speak about loving me." His face tightened. "You're being cruel." "Cruel?" I repeated, leveling my gaze at him. "James, you drugged me every night so you could sneak downstairs and cheat on me with my own sister. If you want to talk about cruelty, look in a mirror." Emma broke down again, sobbing into her hands. "Marcus is gone," she choked. "He won't answer my calls. He won't come home." "Good," I said. "Now you know what losing everything feels like." James's voice cracked. "Rebecca, please don't ruin us publicly. We can handle this privately just between families." "No," I said simply. "You ruined yourselves publicly the moment I opened that shed door." His face went pale. He understood. He finally, truly understood. The shame wasn't containable anymore. It was already spilling into the neighborhood, into Marcus's home, into every corner of the life he thought he controlled. "You're destroying my reputation," he whispered. "No," I corrected. "I'm exposing what you built your reputation on." His hands curled into fists. "So that's it? You're just done?" "I was done the moment I saw you with her," I said. "Everything after that is just paperwork." Emma cried harder. James stared like a man watching his final lifeline slip through his fingers, and I felt nothing. No grief, no rage, no heartbreak, just clarity, just truth, just freedom. "You have 12 minutes, I said, stepping past them and heading toward the house. Behind me, their voices tangled anger, panic, pleading, despair. A quiet wind brushed across my face, cold but refreshing, as if the universe itself exhaled with me. By the time I closed the door behind me, their noise had turned into background static, the kind you forget exists until it's finally gone. I walked to the living room window, watching them in silence as they scrambled, James pacing like a trapped animal, Emma clinging to herself like she might fall apart. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something warm settle in my chest. Control, peace, the return of the woman they thought they could break. They were losing everything, and I was finally starting to breathe. By the next morning, the house felt strangely peaceful, as if the walls themselves were relieved James was gone. His absence wasn't a void, it was an opening, a space finally free of lies and sedatives and whispered phone calls at midnight. I woke up without dizziness for the first time in months. No chemical fog, no heaviness behind my eyes, no strange aftertaste from the pills he insisted I needed to sleep. My body felt like it belonged to me again. I made coffee, stood in the kitchen in silence, and let myself enjoy the simple act of breathing. Then my phone buzzed. Marcus. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. I didn't know what he would say, or if he would blame me for dragging him into yesterday's nightmare. When I finally answered, his voice was tired, broken, but steady. "Rebecca," he said, "I don't know how to thank you. I think I needed to see it with my own eyes." I rested my hand against the counter. "I'm sorry you had to find out that way." "No," he said softly. "You didn't do this. They did." There was silence, a heavy, shared silence between two people who had been gutted by the same blade. "I filed for separation this morning," he finally said. "I already moved my things out." I swallowed. "Good. And you?" he asked. "Are you okay?" I heard the sincerity in his voice, not pity, not judgment, just someone who understood. "I will be," I said. "I'm meeting with my lawyer today." "Good," Marcus repeated quietly. "Good." After we hung up, I sat at the table and let myself feel everything I had been too busy to process: shock, anger, betrayal. But woven through it all was something else, something unexpected: relief. Because now there was no more guessing, no more doubting my instincts, no more pretending my marriage was anything but a facade built on manipulation. Later that afternoon, I met with my attorney, a woman named Harper, sharp-eyed and composed, the kind of lawyer who looked like she could dismantle a man's entire life before lunch. She listened carefully, taking notes as I laid everything out. The drugged pills, the affair, the months of deception, the shed, the lock, the confrontation. When I finished, she closed her notebook slowly. "Rebecca," she said, "I need you to understand something very clearly. What he did to you, drugging you without informed consent, is criminal. The affair is morally reprehensible. But the drugging? That is illegal. We're not just filing for divorce. We're filing for protection, damages, and full control of shared assets." My pulse quickened, not with fear, but with validation. Someone finally naming what I had been too overwhelmed to articulate. "Will it be difficult?" I asked. "No," Harper said. "It will be devastating for him." When I left her office, the sky was a pale gray, the typical Seattle gloom. But for once it didn't feel oppressive. It felt like a clean slate. Over the next week, the fallout spread like wildfire. Word travels fast in families, even faster in tight communities. People talk, people whisper, people take sides. And this time, they weren't taking James's. My parents called first, horrified. They didn't even know what to say. My mother sobbed. My father raged. "Your sister?" he repeated over and over, each time louder. "Your own sister?" I didn't have answers for them. I still didn't understand how Emma, my Emma, had become this version of herself. A version so selfish, so careless, so willing to destroy her family for convenience and secrecy. But the consequences reached her quickly, faster than I expected. She tried calling me 7 times in 2 days. I didn't answer. She left voicemails, her voice small, shaking, trying to explain the unexplainable. "Becca, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't even know who I became. I made mistakes, but please don't shut me out. Delete, delete, delete." She showed up at my office on day 3, mascara smeared, hands clasped like someone begging for absolution. My receptionist intercepted her. "Miss Rebecca is not available." Emma tried pushing past her. "Please, she's my sister." "Not anymore," I said from the hallway, my voice colder than I expected. She froze, turning toward me with wide, desperate eyes. "Becca, please just listen." "No. One word. Clean. Final." She broke, right there in the lobby, crying in front of strangers, crumbling under the weight of her own choices. And still, I didn't feel cruelty. I felt distance. A distance so vast she would never cross it again. She eventually left with her shoulders shaking, and I went back to my work without looking after her. 2 days later, my mother called again. "Emma moved out of state," she said quietly. "She's staying with a friend in New Mexico." I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say. I didn't feel joy or satisfaction, just closure, a door sealed shut. Then there was James, the man who once thought he could drug me into silence. He tried reaching out 2 emails, texts, even a handwritten letter he left with a mutual friend. Every message had the same theme: regret, excuses, manipulation disguised as remorse. "We can fix this. It was a mistake. You drove me to it. Emma means nothing. I miss you. Don't destroy my life." I forwarded every message to my lawyer, then blocked him. By the time the divorce proceedings officially began, James looked diminished, smaller, not physically, but spiritually. His reputation was shredded. His colleagues kept their distance. His family barely spoke to him. People didn't see him as a charming husband anymore. They saw him as the man who betrayed 2 women and drugged his own wife. And the best part? I didn't lift a finger to destroy him. He did it all himself. I simply opened the door and let the truth walk out. As for me, my life grew quieter, lighter. My business flourished. There was something empowering about reclaiming control over your own life. Clients noticed my clarity, my confidence. Opportunities opened, the money flowed, and every night, I fell asleep naturally, peacefully, without pills, without paranoia, without wondering if the man beside me was sneaking out of bed to betray me. One evening, about 3 weeks after everything exploded, I sat by my kitchen window, watching the lights flicker across the neighborhood, and for the first time, I realized something profound. I wasn't healing. I wasn't surviving. I was rising, becoming someone stronger than the woman who blindly trusted, someone sharper than the woman who swallowed pills she shouldn't have, someone braver than the woman who thought silence was safer than truth. The storm had torn my life apart, but it had also carved out a new path, one I never would have chosen, but one I finally felt ready to walk. Alone, empowered, unbroken. And as I closed the curtains that night, I knew something else. James and Emma lost everything they thought they controlled, but I had just begun. 6 months later, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me in the mirror, and thank God for that. She wasn't the version who doubted herself, who swallowed pills handed to her by the man she trusted most, who silenced her instincts because loyalty had been drilled into her since childhood. No, the woman in the mirror now stood taller, clearer, sharper. Her eyes weren't tired anymore, they were awake, bright, precise, like she finally understood her own worth. My life didn't just recover, it reinvented itself. My consulting business tripled in clients, tripled in revenue, tripled in impact. Without James draining my energy or undermining my confidence, everything I touched flourished. I bought myself a new SUV, remodeled my office, and even signed up for pottery classes, something I always said I'd do someday, but never did, because I spent years putting someone else first. Not anymore. Someday became now. My parents visited more often. They apologized, not because Emma's betrayal was their fault, but because they never imagined something so venomous could happen under their noses. I told them gently that blame wasn't theirs to carry. The weight belonged solely to Emma and James, and I refused to let their choices poison the rest of my life. Marcus and I formed an unexpected friendship, the kind forged not through trauma bonding, but through mutual understanding. We met for coffee sometimes, shared updates about our separate lives, and laughed at the absurdity of our healing journeys. We never crossed lines. We never blurred intentions. We were just two people who survived the same fire and learned how to walk forward without being consumed by the smoke. Then, one quiet Sunday morning, a letter arrived. No return address, but I recognized Emma's handwriting instantly. Those rounded loops, those soft slants, the style she developed in middle school when she was trying to emulate mine. The letter was long, apologetic, self-excusing, full of explanations no one asked for, and reflections I knew were written more for her relief than my healing. I was lonely, she wrote. I felt invisible in my marriage. James made me feel understood. I didn't mean for it to go so far. I didn't know how to stop. Please don't hate me forever. I read it twice. Not because it held meaning, but because I wanted to be absolutely certain before I made my decision. Then, I fed the pages into my fireplace, watching the flames devour the ink, the excuses, the delusions. The ashes curled, lifted, and vanished. Just like the version of me who would have once begged for reconciliation. A week later, James emailed a shorter message, full of cliches. I'm sorry. I made mistakes. We can fix things. I still love you. Please don't take the house. I blocked him after forwarding the email to my lawyer. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt nothing because nothing was exactly what he deserved from me now. People told me James and Emma were together after everything, that they were trying to make it work, that they were seen at a restaurant looking uncomfortable, sitting apart, barely speaking, like two people trapped in a room full of ghosts they created. A fitting ending. A relationship born from betrayal, built on deceit, held together by guilt. It wasn't love. It was a cage, and they were stuck inside it with each other. Good. Let them live with the consequences of the empire they burned down. My life, meanwhile, felt expansive, open, honest, mine. I traveled to Italy alone, rented a small flat overlooking a bustling street in Florence. I ate fresh pasta every night, drank wine on balconies, and sketched buildings even though I had no talent for drawing. I walked for hours without checking my phone, without wondering where James was, without fearing that sleep meant vulnerability. One evening, as the sun dipped behind terracotta rooftops, I had a realization so clear it almost felt spoken aloud. I didn't survive betrayal. I outgrew it. I became someone who would never again mistake manipulation for devotion, secrecy for intimacy, or silence for peace. I learned to trust the voice inside me, the one I'd ignored for too long, the one that whispered the warnings I wasn't brave enough to face. I learned that betrayal doesn't define you. What you do after does. 6 months after losing everything I thought I needed, I finally understood something simple and profound. They didn't break me, they freed me. I returned home stronger, steadier, whole, and as I stepped into my renovated entryway, the smell of new paint still lingering, I whispered the truth I had earned with blood, clarity, and fire. I am Rebecca. I am loyal, powerful, whole. And the people who tried to destroy me now have to live with each other and with the truth of what they did. And I get to live with myself. In the end, that was the real justice. Not revenge, not humiliation, freedom. The kind they will never know. The kind I wake up with every single day.